Happy Friday, everyone. John Lorden here with a brand new episode of BrainScratch. Thank you so much for your patience this week as I've been dealing with the loss of my stepfather. He is a very big inspiration to me in terms of chasing my dreams and creating, and he will be sorely missed by my family. So I really appreciate you guys, your support and nice comments that I've been receiving from you over this past week. But today, we've got a case. We've got another family that needs help. And with this case in particular, I've been hearing about it for several months at this point, and I wasn't quite sure how to do it. The truth is, there's not a lot of articles on this. And before I changed into this new mode of doing Searchlight and BrainScratch on alternate Fridays, there was just no way that I could handle what it would take to get a decent understanding of this case to present it to you guys. Thankfully, because of the changes that we've made, we're at a point now where we can help this family, and that's the family of Andrew Long. This is a case that is heartbreaking on many fronts. Not a ton of media coverage, obviously one of them. A very tough decision that a family had to make, another aspect of that. And probably the most troubling for me at this point is I don't think this case is even classified as a homicide, and by all accounts, it kind of seems like it is. So we've got a lot to get into. Let's go ahead and get started here by learning where this is happening, and that is Manchester, Illinois. Manchester is a village in Scott County, Illinois, United States. As of the 2000 census, the village population was 354. This is a very small population. You would think in an investigation, you're dealing with a pretty small pool here. Someone that has the information has to be one of 354 people. It's a lot different than when you're dealing with a case in a metropolitan area. This is a very small community, but those small communities can also be very tight-lipped. There can be strong influences that are running through those communities. Is that hanging up part of this case? I'm not sure. But Manchester has a total area of only 1.06 square miles. All of it is land. And of that population of 354, basically there's 99 families. So even if you just wanted to get in contact with one member from each family, I mean, this is a very small population. It makes me wonder right off the bat, why this case is still active after this time. But what is this case? Let's start over at legacy.com with a picture of Andrew Scott Long. Andrew Scott Long, 28, of Decatur, died Wednesday, October 18th, 2017 at Memorial Medical Center in Springfield. He was born May 27th, 1989 in Jerseyville, the son of Kenneth Long and Mary Scoggins Oakley. He's survived by his children, Andrew Long Jr. and Holly Long, both of Manchester. His mother, Mary David Oakley of Decatur, his companion, Kelsey Sprong of Manchester, and 4 sisters, including Chastity Scoggins of Decatur. Of these people, I've gotten communication from Kelsey, a lot of details from Kelsey. Chastity is going to be joining us here today. So we've got a whole interview that we're going to do with Chastity. I was also sent a written note from his mother, Mary Oakley, that was just trying to kind of retell everything that she was going through back in 2017 when this is going down. So I'm going to kind of incorporate that with the interview that we get to later as well. But of course, first we're going to go through the articles. Andrew attended North Green High School. He enjoyed fishing and spending time with his children. I'm also told by another family member he was a big fan of the band Nirvana. At myjournalcourier.com, you'll see why this case is so troubling right off the top. Police looking at death of man found on street. We've covered a lot of cases that might have a title like that, and usually they involve some type of gunshot wound. This is not a case like that. A Manchester woman found Andrew Long at about 4:55 a.m. on October 10th, lying on a street near the Manchester Park, according to Scott County Sheriff David King. From the information that I've been reviewing on this case, I believe he was laying face down. The woman was out walking when she found him, King said. A Root House police officer was the first on the scene. When my deputy got there, emergency medical personnel were loading him up and taking him to Passavant Area Hospital with an apparent head injury. Coroner Cinda Edwards said that Long's death is now under investigation after an autopsy was performed on October 19th. The preliminary autopsy did not reveal any definite signs of foul play, but the situation is still being actively investigated by police, Edwards said. One of the things that's curious about that statement about there being no foul play is the trauma seems like it's specifically to the back of his head, and there are no defensive wounds. A very simple scenario that I can think of is obviously he's facing one direction, doesn't know there's someone behind him, and they're taking a swing at him, likely with some type of object. And unfortunately, this isn't a homicide, but it is still an active investigation. So the autopsy report, not publicly available at this time. We do have some comments that were made to the family by doctors around, Andrew survived for days after this. Unfortunately, there was no brain activity, and that's that tough decision that I mentioned that the family had to make. So we're going to get some more details in terms of trying to understand the wound, but the conditions around the wound, that's where I get stuck with this case, because I feel like, how is this not homicide? You're telling me there was a blow to the back of someone's head. There's nothing obvious in the vicinity that explains that. There's no real possibility that Andrew did that to himself. If he did, you would have found whatever object he struck himself with. Someone else is involved with this. Is that person necessarily a murderer? Maybe not. I mean, if he did do this himself somehow, could someone have removed the object? Maybe. It's very, very strange to me to have conditions like this and to just not have this thing be flagged and all a homicide and an investigation done in that direction. And we'll talk to Chastity a bit more to try and understand that as we're getting into all this. But we do have more information. Thank you to Gia Marie Wright, who also did a video interview with Andrew's long-term girlfriend, although I do think it's important to put out, I think that they were, I don't know that they were considered boyfriend and girlfriend at the time of this happening. There was some things going on in the relationship. There was an order of protection that was in place. We're going to get to much more detail about all that as well. But they were still friends, certainly. They were still in contact with each other, co-parenting the children. But Gia Marie Wright, from what I can gather, was dispatched by the local CrimeStoppers to go and conduct a Facebook interview with Kelsey. And then Gia also did this write-up on it. I just want to thank her for putting all this information together, because unfortunately, I don't think there's a ton of big news publications that are in this area to try to take on a real deep investigative dive with this case. And Gia effectively is the best shot that this case has had at that up to this point. So let's go ahead and see what Gia discovered. Andy Long was 28 years old on October 10th, 2017. He left his mom's in Decatur, returning to his stomping grounds in Manchester, Illinois. His mother dropped him off on October 9th as he was to speak to his probation officer. So obviously we know there's some charges. And just to be totally clear, Andrew seems to be struggling with some form of drug addiction. I believe the charges are likely related to that, but we'll kind of run that by Chastity when she gets on the show. Family members saw Andy walking from Root House to Manchester, a 3-mile walk by himself, carrying a red Marlboro duffel bag. One other thing I wanted to point out, Kelsey told me that she believes he was actually in this area for a few days before this. October 9th, she feels like he was actually dropped off on October 7th. Kelsey saw him earlier that day and said that he had come over to her home to help her pack up her mother's things as her mother was moving out. Her mother wasn't there at this time. So there was some tough things going on between Kelsey and her mom. I believe her mom was actually living in the same apartment that Kelsey was at. They decided that wasn't a good thing, and the mother was moving out. He was there to help, but he wasn't there for long. Kelsey tells me that he was probably there for about 20 minutes during this particular visit. Kelsey's sister was there helping them pack as well. She doesn't recall him having that Marlboro bag at the apartment. He never said where he was going or who he was with. He told her that he would call her in the morning. She doesn't know how he got there, and said that he walked up by himself and he left walking by himself. I tried to press on this a little more with her, just figuring out, could he have been with someone that he didn't want her to know about, especially if there's some tough feelings going on in their relationship? Could it be possible that he was hanging out with a certain type of crowd or something, and he would try to hide that from her, maybe have someone drop him off down the street and he can kind of walk up and they wait for him and then he walks back out or something along those lines? She's really not aware of anything of that nature. And obviously, if he was trying to hide it from her, why would she be aware of that? But even, several years after the point, we're not hearing any information that's coming out to say, yes, we know that he was being driven around by this person or something along those lines. As a matter of fact, we have him being seen with that Marlboro duffel bag walking from one town to the next. So it seems pretty clear that he's basically on foot getting around, at least for some of this. Kelsey said that she got a call at 2 a.m. from the Manchester Police Department as someone reported to them that someone was climbing into her window. So the window at her apartment. And I just want to pause here for a moment, because this is actually pointing out something kind of important about this area. We've got 2 o'clock in the morning, some guy climbing in a window, a neighbor sees it and calls the police right away. This seems like a community that is pretty aware and caring to do something like that. But then we have the conditions of him being found, and I don't know. For some reason, I don't know if people didn't see anything that happened around that, or if for some reason they might have seen it and they're not talking. But I just wanted to call that out. So kind of a strange call to get, police calling you saying, hey, we think someone just came into your apartment. After she disconnected the call, she saw that Andy was in the house. She had his number blocked prior to this, so she didn't know if he had tried to call her throughout the day or prior to him coming into her residence while she was sleeping. From what I understand, he also had to remove an air conditioner to actually get in. There was like a window-mounted air conditioner that he pulled out, and then he crawled in through that. She said that she told him he couldn't stay because she had an order of protection against him. He walked into the kids' room, kissed them goodnight. He gave her a hug, told her he loved her and that he would call her the next day, and he left. I just want to point this out because I know you guys are very detail-oriented. You're going to be picking up on this. She said that she had blocked him. Why does he think that he's going to be able to call the next day? I'm not positive. I know I'd asked her about some communication, and he would kind of contact family members around her to arrange for visitation and stuff like that. So it could be that that's what he meant, that he was going to, get a message to her. Even when they had things going on, and by that I'm pretty sure Gia's talking about difficult times in their relationship, they were still best friends. Kelsey said that he was in a good mood when she saw him, and he was, quote, energetic. He came to check on her. She said that she gave him some tea in a styrofoam cup, and then Andy went out the back door. I was notified that the window he climbed through had an air conditioning unit in it and that he had to pull it out before he climbed through it. Kelsey confirmed that Andy did remove the air conditioner to climb into the window. I asked Kelsey, what was this about? Why is he coming in that way? We're going to have her response during the interview segment. The family stated that they received a call from law enforcement about 6:45 a.m. and notified that Andy was possibly in a car accident. Andy was found face down with a gash on his head and was unresponsive. He was initially taken to the Jacksonville Hospital, then airlifted to Springfield Memorial Hospital. Here is a map of the area. You can see just over 350 people live here. From what Kelsey tells me, there isn't even a gas station or a store here. There's a couple churches and this park. And this is actually a map that Chastity, Andy's sister, sent to me. And she has marked the location where Kelsey's apartment was, a few blocks up here. And then Andy was found really in the street next to this park. I guess this big white object is actually like a overhang or a covering for the park. But the park is located right here in this section. If we jump to just a quick freeze on the video real quick, Kelsey, this is Kelsey being interviewed by Gia. And of course, I'll have a link to this in the description box below so you guys can check it out for yourself. They're standing in the street where he was found. And one of the things that is coming to me about seeing the location they're talking about, I think it's possible that a car could have been pulled over and he could have been standing maybe at the driver's side window. Maybe he was leaning in, talking to someone, something like that. And then someone came up behind him and hit him. That's just one of the possible scenarios I'm thinking of. They kind of try to identify the spot in the street, and just based, it's really tough because I'm looking at this just through the lens of this video, but based on what they're saying with the location, I think it's possible a car could have been pulled up. Another consideration I had was, is this something as simple as, you know, he was sitting on the back of a pickup truck and the driver floored it and he fell out and hit his head? But what seems to be very clear from the information given to the family is the impact was from an object. And they even have some suggestions on what the object might be, or at least its shape. So between 6 and 7 a.m., Kelsey states that she gets another call from Manchester Police Department. And this time they're telling her about Andy and that he's at the hospital in Springfield. She does go to that location. The surgeon comes out and speaks to her, his sisters, and his mother. Andy had flatlined several times during surgery, and he was now in a coma. The family wanted to know what could have caused his injuries. Now, it's a little fuzzy here. Kelsey sent me some language to try to clarify this next statement. Essentially, they were asking, could this have happened from a fall? Because they're hearing the term blunt force trauma, and kind of like my initial assumption, did he fall out of the back of a vehicle or something like that? I believe in response to, was this a fall, the surgeon said that it would have had to have been from a very elevated position. And I believe the surgeon is actually referring to the amount of force that was used. Once again, they pointed out there was no defensive wounds and the cause was blunt force trauma. We're going to get some other explanations about the wound, that essentially this idea that it's a fall from an elevated position isn't very well supported from what the family has been told. Once again, we don't have the autopsy report. Andy's clothes were still in evidence. The phone was not in Andy's possession at the hospital. So that's kind of curious. And hearing that right off the bat, I'm wondering, do we have possibly, is this a robbery motive? Is his wallet missing? His phone missing? Was there anything else worth, that a value on him that could be missing? Just another consideration with this. But the phone was allegedly taken by a local police officer who was the first to respond to the scene. It was reported that the local police officer kept the phone, and the Illinois State Police allegedly had to get a warrant in order to retrieve the phone from the local law enforcement agency. Very strange conditions. I don't know what that's about. I've never quite heard of anything like this that's going on. From what I understand, Manchester's so small, I don't think they even have their own police force, but there's another local police force. It might be, I don't know if it's the Root House or not, but there's another local police force that is effectively helping to police this area. Why would they obtain something that should be in evidence, but then say, we can't handle this case, so we're going to hand it off to the Illinois State Police, but then we're not going to transfer the evidence? And then ISP is going to say, well, we need to see this. This is important for the case. And they have to go to get a warrant to actually get that phone. Very, very strange. I really don't understand it. Illinois State Police reportedly have his phone as evidence now, though they have not made a statement in Andy's case. And that's another thing that's kind of troubling about this case as well. I think because of this condition with it not being fully declared a homicide, law enforcement, from what I can see, has made next to nothing in terms of public comments on this. We're going to see as we go through the few other articles here that, the anniversaries kind of come up and it makes another little circle in the news, but everyone's just reporting everything from that first article that I read to you guys already. No new information's coming out. Law enforcement isn't actively engaging the public in a specific way, asking them, this is how you guys can help us. As a matter of fact, I'm not seeing a whole lot of communication from them after that initial communication that we saw in the first article. Another interesting thing about this phone, This is according to what Gia says, and Kelsey did also tell me this as well. I was notified that the phone had allegedly been wiped clean. None of this has been confirmed by law enforcement. I don't know if they're talking about physically had been wiped clean or if they're talking about the data had been erased on it. And of course, without confirmation by law enforcement, we have to take that with a huge grain of salt. But we already know something's weird with this phone and the way that it's being handled. This isn't normal for, we've looked into hundreds of cases here. I've never heard of anything like this with what would be considered a pretty critical piece of evidence. That phone could have information about who he's reaching out to, who he's agreeing to meet up with. If it was wiped, like if it was erased effectively, that's not making me feel great about this specific member of law enforcement that might be taking this phone and doing something like that. The duffel bag allegedly disappeared. Detectives even asked about the bag at the hospital the day that he was in surgery. From what I understand, that sighting of him walking with the duffel bag was actually a police officer or I'm not sure if it was a police officer or a sheriff, but it was someone in law enforcement that actually saw him walking. So they had an idea about this bag already. Now they're asking about it. No one knows where it is. A couple weeks later, Kelsey and her mother went to the apartment to clean it and to get rid of any food and to get more clothes for them. Basically, Kelsey is so freaked out by what's happened, she decides she's going to go stay with her father, stays with her father, and at some point they're like, we're running out of clothes, we got to go back home, and by the way, the fridge is full and we got to clean all that out. When they do that, they notice that Andy's laundry is in the hamper, and that Marlboro duffel bag is stuck right behind the hamper. She said that maybe he left it all behind to use as an excuse to come back to her apartment to visit at a later time. In the message she sent me, she says that basically him leaving it there was a prompt for her to do some laundry for him. And that, at least from the way she phrased it with me, it seems like she probably would have just done the laundry for him and, put it back in his bag and he could have grabbed it at a later time. But she did also notice, they're saying it's a jacket here, but she described it to me as a hoodie of his, was left outside of the apartment on a table. And she doesn't believe that he had any keys or a wallet. After being in a coma for 8 days, Kelsey stated that the group of surgeons working on Andy notified the family that he had little to no brain activity and he would not recover from his injuries. Andy's mother was given the option of taking him off life support. Kelsey said his 8-year-old son was there to say goodbye to his dad. He has since been to counseling, and she explained to him that someone did this to Andy. Another bit of an important consideration, we know there was an order of protection in place here. Kelsey tells me that actually became a bit of a roadblock once they got to the hospital because they didn't want to allow her in to see him. She called to get it canceled literally that day, but it was still a little bit troubling. But thankfully they got it worked out enough so that they could get his son in there to say goodbye to his father. And as a matter of fact, here's a picture of his son holding his hand. So that's kind of the basics of what happens in October 2017. But what happens with the case after that? Does this thing ramp up? Do we start seeing some developments? Unfortunately, if the media is any strong indicator, not really. This article from thetelegraph.com from May 24th, 2019 points out that this case is coming up on 2 years. Family members of a former Greene County man who died after being found on a Manchester street with a serious head injury still are looking for answers in the almost 2-year-old case. But the rest of this article, it's the same thing that I've already told you guys about, the same as the original article that came out. Here we have another one, May 28th, 2019. Police ask for help solving questionable death. I was really hopeful when I saw this title. I'm like, good, maybe some new information is going to come out, something specific about how the public can engage or help this case. It's actually CrimeStoppers of Morgan and Scott County reaching out to the public for help. Andrew Long Sr. would have been 30 years old, so they're noting a passing birthday. Tragically, his life was cut short in October 2017. Law enforcement says his death is questionable. And that's literally it. The rest of this article is just contact information. Over at WLDS.com, July 13th, 2019, Andrew Long family giving reward for tips leading to an arrest. Kelsey Sprong, Long's girlfriend of 12 years and mother of their 2 small children, says that someone knows something in the case and has not come forward yet. Quote, "We were willing to offer money if that is what it takes to make someone to feel more comfortable in coming forward with information. This is a small town. We know someone knows something, and maybe they don't feel like it was an important thing, or maybe they just didn't think about it at the time because it was a very public incident, but we need the final missing pieces in order to lock all of this together. The police do have information, and the investigation will eventually get there, but for my children's sake and our family's sake, we'd rather have answers." Sprong says she believes Long's death was probably not an accident. When the lead doctor came out, he informed us that the main artery to his brain had been severed. The doctor said it was from some blunt force trauma. We questioned it. Was there any way it was from a fall? He said definitely no. That it was apparently some blunt force trauma, and he had no other defensive wounds, not even from throwing his arms up to catch himself. The doctor said that your body's natural instinct is to throw your arms out to catch yourself. So this blow had to be so traumatic that the instant that it happens to him, it effectively renders him unconscious instantly. His natural reflexes don't kick in at all. Sprong said that despite Long's past involvement with being an addict, he was a really good person to people and was always willing to help. Sprong says that she feels that police have put the investigation on the back burner. Kind of seemed like that the investigation and the story of his death tapered off. It wasn't an easy case. I will say that the officer in charge of the case, Officer Kaufman, that we've been working with, has been a really good person. He's actually brought in another officer to the case recently because they get busy. It just seems like there wasn't much press about it, and people really didn't talk about it. Whenever it came to the local police, they didn't seem to have time for looking into it. And once again, I believe a major component to that is the fact that we don't have this case categorized properly. I've seen a copy of the death certificate. It's manner of death undetermined, which is, in terms of allocating resources and really highlighting attention to it, that's not what you want on the death certificate. The family of Andrew Long is offering a $500 reward if an arrest is made in the case. That reward is in addition to what CrimeStoppers would pay for their cold case crimes. So there is money that's available, and I'm really thankful to hear that CrimeStoppers has had such involvement right from the get-go in terms of sending Gia out. But outside of that, I spoke to them myself about this case in particular. They're very active, very supportive, and they run a mechanism for keeping you anonymous that is pretty much foolproof. I've talked to them at length. I don't want to go into all the details here. They're concerned about it from every different angle. They've got it worked out. So just know that if you're someone that has information, if you're fearful for some reason about having that information come in with your name attached to it, you don't have to be. You can call this into CrimeStoppers. They will give you a mechanism to check back with them in terms of, did your tip help the case? And if it does, you're going to get the reward money they have allocated, but it looks like the family is also allocating some funds as well. In terms of the available information online, that's it. I knew I was going to need help with this case, and I'm so thankful that we have Andy's sister joining us now. Let's please welcome Chastity Scoggins. Welcome to the show, Chastity. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I just also want to say thank you to several family members. It's very clear to me there's a lot of love for Andy. I've been hearing from a lot of different people about this case. So I just wanted to point that out. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be weaving in information, not only asking Chastity direct questions, but I have information from her mother, Mary, that will be weaved in with this, and information from Kelsey, Andy's girlfriend, that we're kind of weaving into this as well. I just wanted to start with a section that your mother had written that she called "A Little History on My Son, Andy." He was a great kid growing up. He went through some hard things. Andy had a lot of heart and anger built up inside of him. He was one to keep things bottled up inside. Due to this, he had done some drugs. He would do real good for a while and then get back into depression and go back to drugs. So we're hearing kind of about both sides. But tell me, let's start with what's your favorite thing about Andy?
My biggest thing was just how somebody could literally do him wrong and then the very next day say they got kicked out or something, they had a fight with their parents or their girlfriend, and he would be like, oh, well, you can come and sleep on our couch. And just 24 hours prior, they could have taken his money, cigarettes, and everything, and just his heart was just of pure gold.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that from a few different people. I don't think we need to dive into this too much, but can you just touch on what's the anger that your mother is referring to, especially because it seems to relate to his drug use? Do you know what the cause of that is?
A lot of that ties back to his father and things that transpired between them.
Okay. Okay. Just
growing
rough.
up throughout the years. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And how many siblings are there in the family?
So there's my brother and I, which we share the same mother, different fathers. And then he has three other siblings, three other sisters, and they share the same father, different mothers.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
So yeah, there's five of us.
Okay. Back to another section that your mother had written. In school, he got good grades until high school. Then he would get not so good grades one semester, then A's and B's the next semester. He was also a bit of a class clown. When I read that, I almost thought, did my mom send this in? Because that's like a perfect explanation of me in high school years as well. What did you notice in terms of his struggle with drugs? When did that start, and what were you seeing around that?
Honestly, we both struggled
Yeah.
with it. It was something we struggled with together, and we would try to get clean together. A lot of it, I think, did stem from those hurts early on from the relationship he had with his dad.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Do you happen to know if his drug use, was it tied to the Manchester area in particular?
I would say it was tied mainly to just the Greene County area,
Okay.
that county as a whole,
Okay.
which Manchester is in Scott County, but yeah.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Can you tell me just about how Manchester plays in with his life? Why is that area? Is it just because his girlfriend had lived there, or was that part of his past previously? Did he live there? Okay.
Yeah, they had actually lived there together for a while, and then some things transpired, and he had moved up here with us, here in Decatur. And
Okay. And that was only a few months before this, right? That he moved to Decatur?
yes,
Okay. Okay. So that's where he's living at the time. Is he working at this time?
at that time, no.
Okay. When he was working, what did he do?
He actually worked at a place. They make bricks. They're in Alsea, Illinois. They've even made bricks for like the space shuttle landing.
Okay. Got you. So, when did he lose that job? Like pretty soon before all this, or was he out of work for a while?
It wasn't long before that.
Okay. Okay. Do you know when and where he was scheduled to meet up with his probation officer?
From what he had told Mom and I before he left to go down there is he was going to go that Monday to the courthouse to get his probation transferred from the county down there from Greene County up here to Macon County.
Okay. Okay. Well, that
Yeah.
would make sense. Okay. So, but we don't have a specific time. Like we don't know. He was supposed to be there on Tuesday at 10 o'clock or something. Okay. What was your impression of his relationship with Kelsey? I understand they were together for many, many years, but what was your take on that relationship as a whole?
As a whole, it was great. I've seen them, you know, grow up together. She's like my sister. They would have good times, bad times, just like any other couple that's been together for that long a time.
Yeah.
I can remember one incident when they were in high school and they got their dog Swisher, and they worked out a custody agreement for the dog.
Wow.
Yeah.
So were they kind of going on and off pretty much throughout this whole period of time then?
It was more on than off.
Okay.
More towards the last few years of his life. There were more struggles, of course, because of the drugs and stuff, and her trying to protect the children. And
yeah. Okay. So I did ask Kelsey because I was kind of concerned when I saw that there was an order of protection going on here. And I know a lot of people assume right off the bat that that means, oh my God, there was some violence that was going on there. Not always the case. There's other conditions for orders of protection. So she states that Andy had some issues and that she and his parents agreed that he needed to work on that stuff before trying to address their relationship. So she was basically getting the order of protection to help remove herself from kind of his focus so that he could focus more on those issues. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, she also made clear to me that the OP didn't have any aspect in terms of keeping him away from his children or anything like that. And he was able to arrange visitation with his children just by simply contacting Kelsey's father.
Yep.
Okay. And what was your take on the relationship between Andy and Kelsey's father?
Honestly, Kelsey's dad looked at Andy like a son. Her whole family just loves him to death. They welcomed him with open arms, even through the struggles with the drugs. Kelsey's dad still tried to be that father figure, that male role model.
That's great to hear. That's really great to hear. You know, we don't shy away from the cases where people are known to be users or if they're known to be sex workers or whatever. And to just hear that you have people that are part of, maybe it's not your traditional family makeup, but it's still people that are close to you that are keeping their hearts open as you're going through something like that. Yeah, I really appreciate that he was there in that way. So according to Kelsey, when Andy came over on the afternoon of the 9th, so his first visit to her apartment, she says he was only there for about 20 minutes. It wasn't like, I mean, I know there's a lot of versions of this story where it makes it sound like he was helping move out her mom because of something that happened between her and her mom. And I guess he was kind of helping in a little bit of a way, but if he's only there for 20 minutes, it was more of kind of an emotional check-in with Kelsey to make sure that she was handling this okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he did that a lot for her.
Okay. Do we have any idea where he went after that? Now, Kelsey says he was there at some point in the afternoon. She's kind of fuzzy on the time frame on that, but we know between that and him coming back at 2 a.m., he was out and about somewhere. Do we have any tracing on where he was in that in-between time?
I do know one of his sisters said that they had seen him walking down the highway between Roothouse and Manchester. I don't recall, though, if she said he was headed to Manchester or to Roothouse, though.
Okay. It was on that day, though, that afternoon in particular?
Yeah.
Did she notice the duffel bag? Did he have the duffel bag?
She didn't say.
Okay. I'm just trying to use that as a piece in terms of, because we know the duffel bag gets left at Kelsey's effectively. So that could help us possibly understand. If he had the duffel bag, it would probably be that he was on his way to see Kelsey. If he didn't have the duffel bag, then it could have been after he saw her, because we know that he wound up leaving it there. Okay, so I did also ask Kelsey about the conversation between her and Andy when he snuck in at 2 a.m. because I was just thinking, you know, if I had that situation happen, I'd be like, what are you doing here? Like, you know,
right.
what is this about? She told me, and I'm going to quote her here, I do remember asking what in the world he was doing coming in the window and explained to him that he couldn't stay now, even if I did want him to, because the police had been called And if they came to do a welfare check and he was there, we would both get in trouble because the OP, the order of protection, was still in place.
Yes,
So,
the neighbor had actually called the cops
yeah,
saying
which,
that they had seen somebody coming in.
and I pointed that out when I was talking about this case earlier. We've got a community that's seemingly keeping an eye on each other. I thought that was pretty incredible for someone to notice that, to call the police, for the police to call her right away. Like that I'm hoping that that same type of person is out there with the big piece for this case now to
Right.
make that phone
Me
call.
as well.
Yeah. I mean, I just, I know these small communities that sometimes there's different tensions and pressures in terms of people coming forward with information, but I know that they also have a lot of love and people that look out for each other as well. So that's a bit of an interesting aspect to this. She also confirmed with me that no one else was at the apartment at that time. It was just her, the kids, and then he came in and he went back out. So it's interesting. There's a few different aspects in this case where I'm wondering about law enforcement's involvement. I'm just going to be completely honest with you about that.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting that she's mentioning one of her fears is that law enforcement might be dispatched to the home to do a welfare check. And she's telling him that's why you can't stay here. And effectively, he's leaving at that time. So I'm just wondering about the possibility that he's interacting with law enforcement fairly soon after that. Because what if he's heading out while they're coming in or something along those lines? But we know that he does leave around 2 a.m. and he is found by the person that's walking the following morning at 4:55. So we've got a pretty tight time frame of less than 3 hours really there. Death certificate says the cause of death, blunt force injuries of the head, but the manner of death could not be determined. Now, in the letter that from your mother, she says the surgeon told you guys that he had been hit by something, and she described it as something like a hammer or pipe.
Yes.
Did you get any additional description from them about the type of injury or what they were thinking about it?
They said it would have probably been more like a hammer just due to the fact of the concentration of the size of the wound.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't mention the shape of the wound in particular because, a hammer, pretty
Yeah, they
defined.
didn't really say anything about like the size of or like the shape.
Okay. Had they mentioned any type of like how his skull fractured or had it broken or anything like that?
Whomever hit him hard enough that it actually severed something in the neck even.
Okay. Okay. But no clear description in terms of the skull. Any particular injuries to?
Not really.
Okay.
And that was the only injury on his entire body.
Right. Right. They didn't notice, because I'm just thinking of someone being struck and then falling forward, especially in a road like that. They didn't notice any like gravel marks or anything on his palms.
No, me and actually his other three sisters checked when he was laying in the hospital bed, unconscious, and there was nothing.
Okay. Nothing on the knees?
No.
Okay. And I know that in the descriptions I've heard, they're saying that he was found face down. But when I was talking to you earlier, sounds like you've got kind of conflicting information on that.
Yeah, we're not 100% sure on that. Due to when the officer arrived on the scene and the Narcan being administered due to a suspected drug overdose, we're not sure how that officer didn't see the head wound.
Okay, so yeah,
If he was, yeah.
This is a whole different aspect of the story that we really haven't covered yet. So effectively, an officer shows up, sees this guy passed out in the street, thinks, well, the officer recognizes him, first of all, knows about him and his past, knows that he's a drug user, assumes that this is a drug overdose, administers Narcan, which is done through the nose, you tell me.
Yes.
And hasn't noticed that there's a traumatic head wound.
Yeah.
At that point. which raises another question in terms of, is that the location where the head wound happened? Because why isn't there an obvious pooling of blood or anything like that that's gone on?
Right, right. And I mean, and to reverse that, why Narcan if you see a head wound of that magnitude?
Right, right. Yeah, why would you assume that it had
Yeah,
anything to do with, okay.
yeah.
Ooh. Um, and this is the same officer that winds up with his cell phone somehow,
Yes.
which is such a strange turn. I still don't understand. So another thing, we kind of breezed over this, but in the death certificate, with the manner of death being set to could not be determined, it doesn't rule out homicide, but it's not the same as actually having it flagged as homicide in terms of the
Yeah.
pressure of the investigation and, numbers that get reported nationally and all that stuff. This isn't hitting the category of a homicide the way it sits right now, right?
Right.
And do you believe that that is affecting the investigation as well, that it's not officially classified as a homicide?
I think to maybe some degree it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of confused by it, to be honest with you, just because I can't imagine some reasonable explanation where it's not a homicide.
Right.
Like I was
Uh,
even theorizing, like, if he fell out of a vehicle or something like that, I think it would be kind of obvious in terms of the trauma that happens to him. And the location looks like, I've only seen it through the video, but
mhm.
he's effectively in the road. I know Kelsey was trying to point it out. I think, and I'm totally guessing, is it about 6 feet away from the curb or so?
I'd say about 6 to 8. Yeah.
6 to 8 feet. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was wondering too. I'm running through all these situations thinking, was there a vehicle that was pulled over there? Was he leaning in? Like I'm thinking of, was he possibly meeting up, like for a drug deal or something, or someone else that pulled over that wanted to talk to him and he's talking to someone on the driver's side window. Someone else comes around. He doesn't know that they're there, something along those lines.
Right.
Does that seem reasonable that there could have been a car that was part of this?
Possibly. Yeah.
Okay.
It
Okay.
does seem very reasonable.
Okay. Because we do have this as an active investigation. Do you know what police are calling it in terms of an investigation? Are they just saying a death investigation?
Honestly, I don't know. They've not really said like what they've labeled it as.
Okay. Okay. But because of that, you guys have not been able to review the actual autopsy report.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, goodness.
Yeah. I personally went to Springfield to try to get a copy of it, and they would not release it.
Okay. It's a really weird spot because if this was an active homicide investigation, I get it. If
Right.
if it's not an active homicide investigation, but it's still a death investigation, I'm just not sure where's the line for, hey, this could be helpful to the family in some way for, like, what if you guys wanted to pursue a civil suit or something like that? That could be,
Right.
information that you need. Yeah, yeah. I don't know how to move anything forward on that front. I'm gonna have to reach out and talk to some friends about that possibility. So we have this strange thing where now your mom said we were told that a Root House police officer had taken his phone.
Yes.
This is the same officer that responded, thought that this was a drug overdose. Same officer who knows him previously. And as a matter of fact, without going into too much detail, this officer is actually kind of married in some way to an extension of your family in
Yes.
a strange way. And that's as far as we'll go in terms of that. But he takes the phone, which I still don't understand. Outside of that, we have some big concerns about how the scene is being handled because it's not being like roped off. It's not being treated as a crime scene. Can you
No.
tell us what happened around the scene?
So from what we were told was the officer that initially responded never cordoned off the scene, roped it off, nothing. From what we've also heard, at least one, maybe two possible school buses even drove through the scene that morning.
And also, wasn't there a story about like a kid that was going to school and someone said that they had stepped in blood?
Yes, I had heard that as well. Yes.
Okay. So it's just once again pointing out to me, at least he had to have been there long enough for some bleeding to have occurred, because we're hearing this other story about, but outside of that, it's just bizarre to me that this thing isn't being roped off, being locked down. Um, CSI
There
does.
were hours that went by without it being roped off.
Right, right. And the strange thing is CSI does come out. They do a crime scene investigation, but it happens
Yes.
hours later.
Yeah. From the time they found him to even the time that the school buses would have come through would have been probably around 3 to 4 hours.
Right, right. Hmm. So the phone eventually gets found or figured out that this officer has it. Does he check it? Do you know if he checks it into evidence? Is he keeping this in his car? Like, do we know where the phone literally is during this period of time?
No.
Okay. But because of what happens, the case gets handed off to Illinois State Police, right?
It went from Roadhouse PD, and then it got transferred to Winchester Police Department because of the county it happened in.
Okay.
Both the counties border each other, and the cops kind of share the responsibility out there because of it being in the middle of nowhere, essentially.
Sure. Sure. Okay.
And then the Winchester PD was when they're the ones that handed it off to state police.
Okay. And state police is made aware of the fact that his phone is out there floating around somewhere, and they decide they want it.
Yeah. We actually got asked by the crime scene investigative lady that was at the hospital getting Andy's clothing and stuff, if we knew if he had a phone. Okay. Which at that time, it didn't dawn on me, but a few days later, I'm like, why did she ask us if he had a phone?
Right.
Like, he should have had a phone on him.
Right, right. So ISP then decides they want the phone and they request it from Roadhouse?
I believe they actually requested it from Winchester.
And then what happens?
It was about a week or two before state police got it. I guess whoever needed to sign the paperwork for the transfer of the phone was gone on vacation, so they had to wait for him to come back to sign the papers or something.
Okay. Okay. And is it accurate? Did I see that there was like a warrant that was filed for them to get that phone?
Yes.
There's so many things I'm not understanding about how things are being handled around this.
Yeah. And we had also heard that it had been wiped clean.
Now I was going to ask about this. Do you mean that it had been erased, the actual contents of the phone, or that it had been physically cleaned? It had been erased.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what we've heard.
Okay. Yeah. And obviously we have to take that with a huge grain of salt, because this is, okay. It's already suspicious just in terms of this phone being taken from the scene. I mean, this scene is processed by a CSI team, so we know that there's an actual process that's coming out here. I don't think it's normal for police officers to start their own type of process when you know that there's a team that's coming out to process the scene. So that's already kind of strange. We've got this big misunderstanding about, oh, I thought that he was just having an overdose, so I was trying to save his life with Narcan. And all the meanwhile, we've got a traumatic injury to his head. Can you, just to be clear, it is to the back of his head?
Yeah, it was like, if I turn sideways here,
yeah,
it was more like right about here.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. In the letter that your mom wrote, which I think that letter was actually written back in 2017, right?
The one that I just sent to you, no.
Oh, that was recent?
She wrote that earlier this week, yeah.
Okay, okay. She states that there's multiple suspects in this. And are any of those still in consideration in your mind?
At least two.
Two specific ones. Okay. Yeah. Can you tell us, without naming them, just how they knew Andy or how they're related to his interacting with him?
Growing up together in a small community.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of along the some type of circle of friends that he was getting back
Yeah.
together with. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know from speaking to you before that you question if that's where he was actually struck or if that's where his body was effectively left after he had been hit, right?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
there
That's been a question from almost day one.
okay? Is there a particular reason why you think he would have been left at that location?
Um, Honestly, I think to deflect the police's point of view and investigation due to the fact that that location was only 2 blocks or approximately from where his girlfriend was living.
Okay. So you think it was a firm attempt to get police looking in the direction of
Yeah.
Kelsey? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting if you are thinking about a circle of friends type of situation. It could be that they picked him up from Kelsey's. It could be that he gets out the door and calls them up, and hey, I've got no place to go, and do you guys want to hang out or something? So,
Right.
could have been very very quick. Okay. So we've talked about this case has essentially been passed through 3 different departments, right?
Yeah.
And it does still sit with the state police now.
Yes.
Okay. How do you feel about how the case is being handled at this point?
Um, I feel like it's very stagnant.
Okay.
I think we've reached that point of just it being very stagnant, almost like you're running your head into a brick wall repeatedly. Um, I know personally, I and Kelsey have tried to reach out to the main investigator on multiple occasions, and we've even struggled to get a call back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I saw in the article, there was an article where Kelsey had mentioned that, and I think that article was from a year ago or maybe a year and a half. I think it was definitely
Something like
pre-COVID.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Where she had mentioned that it seemed like the investigator was kind of doing good at that time and, brought on some other
Yeah.
help. But,
Yeah. It was almost like it was full steam ahead, and then it just went stagnant.
yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. How about interacting with local media? Have you guys done much in terms of really trying to push for some coverage on the local front?
So I know the 2 articles that were written, and then of course the video with Gia from the Illinois Missing Persons. I myself reached out to one of the news stations in Springfield. Um, they seem very interested in the story.
Yeah.
That was a year ago, and I've still not gotten a call back.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it gets tough with some major media sources when you're
Yeah.
reporting on a story like this. They're kind of like
Yeah.
they shy away from it. So
Yeah. And that was another thing that we thought was very odd was that there's not been much media coverage in comparison to a lot of your murders and, or homicide investigations and stuff, or even things of this nature.
I mean, this case has a couple challenges on that front. When you've got the drug use angle, that's always a big challenge. When you've got the case not being categorized as a homicide, that's also
Yeah.
a tough challenge. But I can also tell you from looking through the coverage, I think it would be helpful if the current investigation would release some form of information about it, just something small or a specific request to the public about,
Right.
Hey, I'm the current investigator. Here is what we're working on. We need people that might have been in this particular area at this particular time or something like that.
Right.
There's nothing that I'm seeing in terms of quotes that are, from the active investigator at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And outside of the few quotes that happened back when it originally happened that are just being repeated in several articles, there's really nothing else.
Yeah,
So,
that's about it.
yeah. Yeah. I really hope at some point that maybe, because, these cases start aging and to the point I know that you and your family are reaching out to people like me, like, hey, we just want to move things. Like, we just want to do something that's going to shake something up in this case.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really hope that the investigator might, I don't know, maybe he'll watch this. Maybe he'll think about that. Maybe there's it doesn't take much to grab the media's attention. It really
No,
doesn't. You know,
no.
some little piece of information about, hey, we found this particular tire track, or we found this particular thing we're having trouble identifying. Can the public help us with this? I think it'd be
Yeah.
very easy. Have you spoken to the current investigator about how the phone was handled and about that officer's actions and how all that went down?
Um, I had at one point, and he just said that he couldn't really elaborate on it at that time.
Okay. Did it seem like it was an avenue of their investigation at all?
Possibly.
Okay. Okay. Well, I certainly would be thinking that after what we've discussed here.
Yeah.
I also asked Kelsey if Andy had a tough relationship with any particular members of local law enforcement. And she said, quote, yeah, most of them in Whitehall and Root House. They always acted like he was some sort of kingpin or something, which he was not.
Yeah.
And then Kelsey also mentioned that she and Andy actually had a lawsuit going on with some local police. Can you give us just a real brief understanding of what that was?
Yeah, there had been something that had transpired, and I believe they had Andy downtown at the police station, and then Kelsey had went up there to see what was going on. Um, Things transpired. I believe there had been an excessive use of force, and um, she ended up getting a lawyer, and they sued.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and she won quite a bit of money on that. So
Okay. So it's kind of interesting that you have this. And was that suit was actually, was it filed before Andy's passing?
yes.
Okay. Just another strange condition of this whole thing. And you're wondering if that's a pressure point for someone and they're saying, hey, this thing would go a lot easier if this person wasn't around, or something along those lines.
Right.
But if to counter that point effectively, Andy not being around didn't stop the lawsuit and actually didn't stop Kelsey from kind of coming
No.
out of that lawsuit well. So it doesn't seem like that would have been a particular motive. Okay. So how's the relationship at this point between your family and Kelsey?
Great. Actually, just this past weekend, we had my nephew's birthday party. I and my mother both went down to her grandmother's and celebrated my nephew's birthday.
That's really good. That's what I
Yeah.
was wondering about, because I know in a lot of situations like this, it gets tough for a surviving parent, and then, having the family around that just brings all that pain back of, Andy's gone now. But the fact that you guys are able to do that and be together and show all the love for the kids. I mean, that's really what
Oh
it's
yeah.
about. So
Yeah. We're one big happy family. Like I said, she's my sister.
yeah, yeah, that's great. I also just want to thank her because she was super helpful, and I leaned on her really hard trying to prep for this, and she came back with every bit of information I asked for. So a big thank you to Kelsey on that. Okay, and there's the terrible decision that your family was faced with. I'm going to read a little bit more from your mom's letter here. My son was taken off of life support October 18th, 2017. His funeral, October 24th, 2017. It warmed my heart to see so many people of all ages there. Some spoke at his funeral, remembering the good old days of mischief. I've never heard, nor has anyone ever heard, a bad word about Andy. He was kind to all. She also concluded the letter by saying, we need closure. I, as his mom, I need it. His sisters need it. His children need it. And his friends need it. But most of all, his kids need it. And that's where it's, how do we help you guys get this closure? I'm already putting the word out for tips. If you've got information, please call it in. We've got the details you need in the description box down below. But outside of that, is there anything else that we can do to help your efforts around this?
We actually have started a GoFundMe. in order to hopefully boost the reward money for the tips and for the arrest of these individuals.
Excellent, excellent. And
Yeah.
I know I had seen two different amounts mentioned. I think at one point I saw that it was 500. What's the reward at currently?
Currently, I'm not sure what CrimeStoppers themselves is offering, but I know our family has put up $1,000.
Okay.
My mom has scraped up every penny she could in order to offer that. And just yesterday, one of Andy's lifelong good friends privately messaged me on Facebook and said that he too will be offering $1,000 as well.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, big
Yeah.
thank you to him. That's really, really kind. Okay. So already we're at 2,000. And we've got this new GoFundMe that has literally just been launched as of like a day ago
Yes.
or something. Okay.
Yeah.
And I reached out to CrimeStoppers. I spoke to them, and it's hard to get a solid number on what they offer because they have
Yeah.
almost like a points system. It depends on the type of crime and the type of information and what happens with it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then they said it also depends on how many suspects too.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, on behalf of myself and my amazing supporters, thank you everyone that's kicking in on Patreon and PayPal and buying merchandise. If I get there in time, we're going to be the first donation to the GoFundMe. So we're going to also contribute to you guys to help you with that.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Anything else you want to say before we end here?
I do know his birthday is coming up the end of May, May 27th. And then, of course, May 31st is Memorial Day. And I am looking into, of course, with COVID restrictions, not sure what it's going to look like as of right yet, but we're wanting to get a candlelight vigil soon.
Okay.
Hopefully
Excellent.
like that weekend.
Yeah, that'd be really good. And that's always a great opportunity to once again reach out to that local press as well. If you can just get some cameras there, or the local, I know in those areas it might be more like the local radio station or smaller news publications. Whoever you can get there, that could certainly be helpful in terms of kind of re-raising exposure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chastity. Really appreciate your time with us today.
You're welcome.
And please send all my best to the family. And if there's anything that we can do to help you guys in the future, you know how to get a hold of me. All right?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Brain Scratchers, what is going on with this case? I think the obvious possibilities I'd be considering would be the possibility he met up with old friends, some old circle of friends from that particular area. Could there be possibly a drug connection or a dealer that's involved with that circle of friends? Was there some type of meetup that happened at the park that went sideways? That's kind of one of the aspects that I would be seriously looking into. It seems to me that there's a very strong likelihood that there's probably two people involved in this. If he's going to be struck from behind like that, I have to think something else has his attention so firmly grabbed or rooted, and that's going to be something in front of him. So it seems to me that someone isn't talking. Someone probably watched that strike happen right in front of their own eyes, and they're not coming forward with that. My biggest fear is that strike, I'm worried that it came from a police baton or a nightstick. I'm pretty concerned about what happened with the phone, and hearing from Kelsey that Andy actually had a bit of a rough relationship with law enforcement. On top of that, there was a court case that was going on between Kelsey and law enforcement. There's a lot of tension and factors at play there that really have me concerned that we might have a bad actor in all this. The other thing is the fact that this hasn't been categorized as a homicide, considering the nature of the injury, considering there's no reasonable explanation. If you watch that footage for yourself, what could have happened to him? He's found in the street, face down, blunt force trauma to the back of his head, such a severe strike, it incapacitated him instantly. I'm really worried about that aspect. And then, of course, we've had a lot of stopgaps in this investigation. And I don't want to keep pointing back at the phone, but that's just so major. Why? Why did that happen that way? We still don't have a great explanation for it. Keep in mind, this community, kind and aware enough to call police when a man is seen entering an apartment window. The police responding to that quickly, calling up that person to say, we think someone's coming into your apartment. It's a question now of, can we get that kind and caring community to pick up the phone? I have a feeling, even if there's two people that were involved in this and one of those people was watching this happen, I have a very strong feeling there might have been other people that noticed this as well. It could be that they're intimidated or they're scared to come forward. So once again, I just want to remind you, Crime Stoppers will keep you anonymous. They will. It's what they do. They do it all over the country. If you need more help in terms of understanding that, talk to them before you give them the tip. I was able to get on the phone with someone pretty high up in their organization in a matter of minutes. It's not hard, and they will make you comfortable. They'll tell you how they keep you safe. So please, if you have the information and you're afraid to send it in, use Crime Stoppers. A big thank you before we end today's episode to several new patrons. Thank you, Stephanie Lowe. Thank you, Chelsea Nordic, Pamela Bommersback, and a special thank you to Brandy Bradford. Thank you so much for helping to support the channel and what we do here. If you'd like to do the same, please visit lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. I also want to say thank you to everyone that I have spoken to. There's family members. I'm not sure if they want me to publicize their names or not, so I'm not going to, but you know who you are. There was a lot of information that was given to me to help me understand this case. I appreciate each and every one of you, but I also want to give a special thank you once again to Chastity Scoggins, Mary Oakley, Andy's mother, and of course, Kelsey Sprong, the girlfriend. So that's it for today's episode, everyone. Stay safe. Have a nice weekend. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked right here on the Lord and Arts channel.